So just think about this in simple terms. You are British and not postmodernist British. You apply for a tenancy agreement with a local authority in Mercia, the place where King Aelfred came from. At some point, the country deliberately invaded by an evil wizard called John Cotton, or David Gilboa, depending on which wizard you want to say is Saruman in this. I think it's probably John Cotton, because he waved his arms about and made up a load of bullshit kabuki for money and power. But the correct inference effectively is, now my brain is totally short-circuiting. Oh, fuck. Oh yeah, that was the inference, isn't it? So for McGrath & Co to operate, the B word, I don't even want to say it in English legal terms, it's probably going to be a dirty word, because the pink aura strategy works via words, doesn't it? So he says words in policy documents are basically landmines. You stick them in, your lawyers never point at them and say, can you clarify what that word means? Because everybody knows, or it can be too ambiguated for it to have a meaning in the first place. So unfortunately, if you were to reform the justice system, you would probably actually have to ban the B word from documents, unfortunately, because it allows this kind of entryism. But the problem, of course, or the solution maybe for someone like my father's former law partners, is they've got a legitimate excuse, which of course a lot of people have, which is, I'm just sort of an 80s and 90s liberal too, mate. I never went along with any of this nonsense. We sort of had to create something because of potential backlash, that kind of stuff. So you think about it from our perspective, defensive posture is probably reasonable. Maybe if I'm going to set up an organisation to deal with that from my end, we'll think about proper education, that kind of thing, so I can do my own version of not being a dumb tribalist and resolve things peacefully that way. So perhaps that was the intention. But the obvious conceptual absurdity at this point is just too large to ignore. There is no potential of justice unless you get physically out of the city for obvious reasons. Ergo, you have got the effectively postmodernist Baudrillardian dome enclosing the city itself. So because we have cracked the dome effectively, you've got so much insider knowledge that they can't say anything at all in terms of function. They can't do anything at all because we've now got an actual portal into their organisation. So, so I don't want to be crude, but we are, I suppose, in the evening. So if you get into a hole, it's quite hard to get you out again. You can keep going as long as you like. So because we've got now an inference chain through their servers, they can't block satellites. So we can do this until one of us is killed. They can't do anything about it. Nobody can prevent this going to wherever we like in the globe. So their attempt to Sovietize the city has failed because maybe you could Sovietize a Far East Russian province or something in the modern day, but you can't exactly do that in a British city. So what we're doing at the moment is sort of howling, "Can you find this pig?" As loud as we can, and watching everyone involved panic, because this only works, as you've established, based on literally. I'm going to stop saying literally. I will never. So if I ever use that again, it's like a swear. Fuck me. It's a swear jar. Don't use that. Don't speak like that. Don't talk like that. But yes, the strategy for John Cotton was find someone corrupt and therefore ugly enough to take his money. He finally found someone. They trained her to do her theatre performance, and the current head of McGrath's walked in and caught her. It's beyond embarrassing. This is clearly, in any sensible measure, an incredibly serious matter for Britain in general. So because the strategy between Burnham, her and her handlers has fallen apart so spectacularly, they currently appear to be trying to keep an information blackout over the city itself, while Burnham is in Ukraine. So he's obviously farting about, pretending to be in charge of something to puff him into the stratosphere from his Makerfield theatre performance as well. But it's Birmingham is always their weak point. My colleagues were targeting Manchester for obvious reasons. things, but they're just wrong. You kept saying, if you'd spent your resources in Birmingham, and by spending your resources, I mean just getting people to go in there, talk to people in charge, have the sort of conversations you were having to try and win a pointless seat in a pointless contest. Okay, it was good to run it because you can show that you will turn up and fight these people, and you've then got a team of people who will show up physically and fight, which is what you're going to need. But when that goes from that kind of arena into national policy, the fighting is proper control of the British Army, and that's not Burnham, is it? So whoever Burnham defers to for his patronage at the moment needs to be established before anybody cares what the Goblin thinks. But while the theatre performance carries on, that is their vulnerability. So you've got a by definition a postmodernist court. It can't run on British legal principles. That has catastrophic effects for the British legal system. It just can't run. Demonstrably can't run, not safe, or conversely is safe. So is batting back all the shit that people left behind could be trying to pass through in my absence, because my instruction is don't unless I'm doing it, or I will just appear via satellite and do a case review, and if you behave dishonestly, we'll send you to jail for under serious misconduct policy. If for money you're carry on cranking when meat is sort of going into a grinder and you're not really interested in proper case management and someone gets hurt or killed, I will stick you in a box. I have absolutely no ethical problem with doing that, as has been repeatedly indicated. And by the way, Jennifer Southall is going into a box anyway because you don't actually attack people. She's been caught repeatedly over the course of her career. Someone like that has no basis being in a role like that, not temperamentally suited to it, not intellectually capable, pathologically dishonest to boot. So you can't have that kind of people in a compliance department. It's never suitable to run about with her little friends in the buildings and try and took it over effectively. So we can rectify that now. I mean, there were so many people who fell apart. Peter Bishop was great, because looking back, people looked at that kind of stuff and thought it was silly and dumb. So all this kicks off. He's got to find some kind of inspirational quote. So he finds this American psycho who promotes the concept that if a woman is bursting into tears because she's being physically assaulted, if I intervene, that's some kind of manipulation on her part. Whereas if you're a functional, normal person, you just kill him, don't you? But the whole point of the ideology, it's the and parasitic mind stuff, isn't it? As I forget the South American genius, they sort of sting you and take your brain over so you can't defend yourself. And is that as an ideology via the airwaves? So that's being pumped into people's brains, and you're the only one not stupid enough to fall for it. You then get attacked by a load of morons if you behave normally, and that causes further problems, etc., etc. So the problem was because you're in a department where everything put into a database is very, very important. So you could go into a property where there's just a dead body, and you're sending people who are just money people. They don't know what to do with that, but they are expected, if the police turn up, to comply with evidentiary standards because these are adults, so they're going to be professionals and do that. So you have to have a certain level of functioning, but the bureaucrats never did, and because of the technology plus the money spigot, could just steal things on a personal level, and of course were the ideal people to just slot as apparatchiks. They're ugly, they're stupid, they're totally unemployable outside of these roles, they're also highly specialist, so there's an element of fear. If I leave this, I'll never get anything else, when somebody looks at your CV and that kind of thing is going to go, oh right, blimey, and this kind of stuff, well, if you've done other stuff as well. But the way the city is run, I mean, in the British state, I mean, obviously the law of the various pension agreements is in everybody's mind, but you look at the current forces impacting the country, and you think, well, this is a waste of time anyway, this is never going to pay out. We've totally lost any kind of security, border security. Anybody can come into the country illegally and just murder us in the streets, and of course the police cannot cope, as demonstrated by the previous weekend and Maccabee and that kind of stuff. So if you're not a moron, you're booking it out of Birmingham. And when you live in Birmingham, what does that say about London? Right, so I mean, I reckon we could do okay, but it's not exactly great, is it? It's pretty embarrassing if nothing else. But the counter-revolution comes from the north, doesn't it? As is happening. You're talking to colleagues and saying, well, where are you going to? It's always Scotland, because you've got positive weapons culture, the thermotic energy is in your favour, it hasn't been sort of sucked out of joy as England has. It's just about got a functioning legal system, so the police are worthless and cowardly, but that's kind of in your favour in most cases. And when it comes down to the actual the nuts and bolts of the legal system, they're if you've got a brain, you do okay, put it that way. Whereas in Birmingham you'd have no chance. The current instruction, though, we'd have as someone who can't actually speak to the HRC because of their dim-witted attempts at an IP block, is Irish bugger off if you can. When you walk around the city, you do frequently run into Irish guys who are sort of freezing on the streets. And I spoke to one guy who had his tent robbed and or burned in another case. But of course, all these people are fleeing north for obvious reasons. The local authority here is typically utterly worthless and corrupt as well, so they're not getting much help when they get here. We're trying to get them referrals, so we hope that goes in the chain to Scottish branches of GT Stewart, and they can get some more pragmatic help in many cases. But because of the way the infrastructure is set up, this is just so defensible that as long as you can work or are basically capable, you can do pretty well compared to sitting around waiting for your throat to be cut in a place like that. Oh, fuck me. But the good part is the information blockade just can't hold because they're just making people outside of the argument so angry. So I forget what the current blow up is. It's always something, but people are sort of tearing each other's throats out to get over some nonsense. But I mean, as soon as you actually start getting the laptop evidence handed off, the level of rage directed at the city is going to be absolutely overwhelming. If you can get a sensible head of state would force a general election at this point. He's not going to let Burnham fuck about if you're sensible. So if the proposal is, well, if you want an early investment in life, £2,500 in current British denominated pounds to have a chance of cutting the king's head off is a pretty good bet. I mean, you could buy a lottery ticket and the odds of that are, I don't know what the odds are these days, but cutting Charlie's head off is fairly easy if you wanted to. It's just that generally the British don't or haven't. You have to put in a lot of work to make that happen. So if you can convince the guy that he should just abdicate or do something else, then there is a potential that he could stick his head down on top of half the seat and let me hack it off. So I don't know if this will help Andrew Mitchell at all getting investigated into legal services to find out what the 2020 incursion was. I think, again, for the record, the battle of the Birmingham Battle of Book Waving was, I think, possibly mitigated by the Office of the City Solicitor by waving around race and class and the ruins of empire, which is probably a more sensible way to look at the current dynamic, the general frustration at the revolting state of the place. But you say, as all things, the problem is just these morons in Birmingham Labour just trying to play these political games for power. They've been caught doing it repeatedly. This is why the various right reports repeatedly finger Birmingham Labour as having repeatedly done it. It's just that obviously their client groups are now looking at them saying, why, quite rightly, why should I defer to you? Who are you? Just that normal, educated people are caught in the middle of this nonsense, while John Cotton and his managing director scurry out the back. But you've got to think that this is why the strategy works. So it doesn't matter who you are, young or old, rich or poor, beautiful or ugly, whatever you may be in life. If your soul is beautiful, you will look at the managing director of Bromsgrove Council and just think this is the most revolting woman to have ever existed in the history of British governance ever. That this woman could have ever managed to be paid a single penny and a senior role by a British public body is a total disgrace. It's even worse, I think, than Lammy lecturing the Russians. It's such an international embarrassment. It's something that I will never, ever forgive. And if it comes down to it, and if we actually win this, and I do get to cut a head off as well, then it is totally deserved. If you are hijacking the corporate communications of a British public body and publishing the sort of literature towards people's children that would not be banned in school, but you would have to have someone like me in to teach it. So I say, okay, well, here's this book, here's where it comes from, here's the suppositions behind it. But in a comparative religion sense, it is sort of just a hostile act. It's meant as hostile propaganda, effectively saying to prepare for a territory invasion by trying to sever the roots from people's children and say, you have no claim to this, which is not in any sense true. If people are in a British public body doing that, they're just being removed, so we're not tolerating this for a single second. There are certainly going to be criminal prosecutions under British law for that. Don't need to change the law, it's already existing. People doing that from Green Lane are going to be apprehended and dealt with. We will make sure of it. And if that causes problems, if people kick off and scream and fuss, couldn't give a toss, we wouldn't obey the law. What we're having now after that is from the hilarious children's story, we're going to putting people into a box for a long time. So Windsor Green is a pretty nasty prison. You wouldn't really want to spend a moment of your life in there, I assure you. But various members of Birmingham Labour are going into there, screaming and wailing for the rest of their natural lives, and then we'll decide whether their lives should be cut short along with Ruda Cabana at some point. When you make these kind of statements, it's obviously a threat, but it's not really a threat, it's a chain of inferences. So I sit on a bench and I make these kind of statements. But if a solicitor wanted money, they would put the statements down and write them down. They would go into Birmingham University and speak to the officials involved. They would follow the evidence chain back through their databases. They would call the police. Various people would be arrested, and that would all be accomplished without me lifting a finger, because the money chain from central government to fund the British legal profession would work, and that would happen. The reason it hasn't, as is outlined, is because of the security situation caused by John Cotton. So this is why Birmingham Labour are Poochies. So this is obviously a postmodernist weapon, isn't it? We've now created in front of St Giles. There we go. So you sit here in the dark, you can create weapons to kill people. So these people are now Poochies, point at them and say it with a camera in their face. Hello, Poochie. Play the Simpsons clips, dress up as Poochie, play this game as much as you like, because this is a counter-Alinsky strategy. You find your target, make it large and visible from space, and it explodes because it has visibility. The target is, of course, the managing director, because she can only be a theatre performer from this point out. Therefore, by theatre performing in reverse and cursing the city further, there are various curses, of course, Martin Carty being so handsome, all the women want to kiss him, and various other silly curses we've bestowed upon the city, me being free and killing them from space with my voice, that kind of lovely stuff. They're just fucking up. They can't do anything about this. When anybody actually investigates who just thinks in a sort of 80s, 90s mindset, it's like lancing a boy, or you've got a river of pus comes out of the council house and it flows directly into Windsor Green. So I think when Enoch Powell spoke about rivers of blood, when you say no, it's rivers of pus, it's just mutated bureaucrats sucking off debased British currency in sort of a vampiric fashion, low-level gangsterism, foreign corrupt networks, and a general intimidation culture to back it all up, plus general members of the Epstein class who don't want to be arrested. This whole sort of noxious soup of scum is stirred round by our intrepid reporter Jane Hayes as she reports on the polis of Birmingham with her highly trained political senses, while her court officer just takes the piss out of the whole thing from space. I think Cold Chin, unfortunately, all these old guys were unfortunately never had the joy we have of the communications technology. If they'd have had the joy of being able to sit on a bench and just tear people's throats out from space, people like Schopenhauer would have just been monsters. In the 1800s German philosophy school, Nietzsche is the hard guy who's withered, Hegel is the resentful goblin, but Schopenhauer is the sort of meek little sped sitting in the corner because he's a sped and can't do anything about it. But if he gave him this technology and linked his voice with the German army, say, then they would have run this shit into Stalingrad. They would have just been bulwarks in Europe, and the Holy Roman Empire would have just annihilated the globe. I mean, Hitler would have had nothing on the Germans. They would have just conquered on themselves. And we would have been with them along the way, striding forth. But obviously, if you have people giving you bad strategy, maybe sort of bouncing you around the globe, then things get subverted and things go wrong. So, a lesson for other empires after what happens to us happens. Anyway, it's Friday. On Saturday, if you can please find the Managing Director of Bermondsey Council, and if you can send information leading to her capture and arrest to G Orwell 8484 at protonmail.com.